Great, thank you, choir. So, if I were to say to you, today we're going to learn some teaching of Jesus, where does your mind go? Where would most people's mind go? Oh, we're going to learn a teaching of Jesus. I kind of think you might think boring, or just, we have this wonderful painting downstairs of Jesus and the children, and Jesus gathering the children. It's this nice, peaceful, calm. It's not somebody going convulsing in the middle of it. But welcome to Jesus's teaching. This is Jesus's teaching. We're not up a high mountain this time. We're not meditating, Om. It's the real deal. This is Jesus's first instance of teaching in the Gospel of Mark, and it's definitely not his last. So be watching for that. It's a thread in any gospel. The Jesus as teacher, Jesus as rabbi, and often the setting is the synagogue. So Jesus is at the synagogue and he is teaching. Another funny thing about the story is, so Jesus is teaching. We have no idea what he said. None. So a lot of times in these teaching scenes, sometimes there's paragraphs. If it's the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew, there's lots of red letter language going on where Jesus is teaching a lot of good stuff. Here, we have no idea what he was saying in the synagogue. None. And oftentimes when it's a teaching situation, there's mention of a scroll, and Jesus unrolls the scroll, and we know, it's Isaiah, or it's some part of the Bible that we know as the Old Testament. There's verses, or Jesus, has some interpretation. Nothing. Nada. All we get today is reaction shots of the disciples and the people who are in the synagogue. We have no idea what he said, but the reaction, part one, was astonishment. They're so amazed by his teaching. How often has that happened to you in a teaching setting? It does happen, but it's pretty extraordinary to be astounded at teaching. Wow, what was he talking about? What was going on? So they're astounded. And the other thing they say is, he teaches with authority. Kind of a strange thing. He teaches with authority. What's up with that? We may have to pick that thread up and think, authority. Is Jesus being bossy? He's teaching with authority. And his teaching is not like the scribes. So that's interesting. They were used to this same old from the legal experts, the religious experts, and whatever Jesus was doing, it was not that. So teaching is going on, and then all of a sudden, unceremoniously, the lesson plan is interrupted by the scary man with the demon, or the scary demon, comes into the synagogue, completely interrupts, and starts being mouthy with Jesus. Jesus of Nazareth, what do you have to do with us? Have you come to destroy us? Oh, just rude, so rude. And it's kind of puzzling. It's like, we just see this one person there, and when the voice is talking about us, is that person talking about us, humans, that we can see? And near as I can figure, this unclean spirit that is currently living in a human is a representative from the demon world. And apparently Satan didn't let his demon world know that, it wasn't just when Jesus was in the wilderness that he was going to fight evil. It was practical stuff every day, every place. Jesus was going to contend with evil. So, what are you trying to destroy us? I know who you are, Holy One of God. And typically, in stories where Jesus is teaching or Jesus is about to do a healing, Jesus has little conversations. Jesus has little dialogues. And we get more information about what's going on. In the Gospel of Mark, or John, especially last year, we saw Jesus' dialogues with Nicodemus or the woman at the well. Or Jesus asks really powerful questions like, do you want to be made well? But here, there is no conversation. Jesus is as sharp as anything. Perhaps it's some of the sharpest language Jesus has in the entire gospel. And looking at the Greek, I think the best English translation is, shut your pie hole and get packing. And that's, the end of the conversation. And then, then there's the drama. The demon comes out, and the people are amazed once again. And then they said, this is a new teaching. This is a new teaching. With authority, they say again. He can dispense with demons. Wow. And then Jesus' fame spreads. So this is such a fun story. And as I worked with it this week, I thought, at first, it's very simple, it's very short. And the more I worked with it, I thought, oh my goodness, there's so much going on here. Wow. And it was hard to know what lens to use with this story. Is it a teaching story? Is it a healing story? Is it an exorcism story, which is a part of a kind of type of a healing story? And then I realized, it's really a combo. That interruption in the middle of Jesus' lesson plan? That was no interruption. It was an illustration of what Jesus' teaching can do. Sometimes we think of teaching as this quiet, passive, intellectual thing. Not so with Jesus. With Jesus, his teaching is revolutionary. When I was looking at this text and I saw that line, a new teaching, it reminded me of our church's theme, breaking the mold. Jesus was breaking the mold. He knew the tradition. He knew the texts. He knew who God was pretty intimately. And the people received it as something new. How do you receive Jesus' teaching? Are you kind of passive about it? It is interesting, and it is fun, and you can look at maps and study and consider the Greek. But do you think about how Jesus' teaching is revolutionary? It changes things. It's something new. I was thinking that Jesus' teaching is not an ivory tower kind of thing. His teaching is directly connected to healing. It is teaching that heals. It is teaching that addresses evil and dispenses with it. Very applicable teaching. Well, as Jesus' disciples, what's our strategy as we look at this teacher. Part of our liturgy and part of our prayer in our study of Mark is that we turn, that we trust, and that we travel with him. In baptism, we turn away from evil and its powers. We turn toward God. We hear God's voice saying to us, "You are my child. You are beloved. I'm delighted in you." In that turn, that's what we hear. We turn and then we trust what we heard, and then we travel. And as we travel, we become disciples. And I thought in our travels, another T word, we are taught. We are taught. And this teaching is very, very powerful. Some of you, if this isn't your first rodeo with the Gospels, may be thinking, aren't there other stories where Jesus is in the synagogue and Jesus may be teaching or something, and it's the Sabbath, like it was in our text today, it's the Sabbath, and Jesus heals, and then what happens? He gets in trouble. Controversy. It's interesting that this story, it's a healing, it's an exorcism, it's at the synagogue, it's happening on the Sabbath, and there's no controversy. Makes me think that this is kind of phase one of Jesus and his ministry and his teaching. And it's foundational for us. It's how we know that Jesus is the real deal and not some sort of cult leader or somebody that's there for his own ego. This sets the stage that Jesus is amazing. His teaching is authoritative, and his teaching is directly tied to healing and dispensing with evil. How often do we think about Jesus' teaching being that powerful? If we're being trained in that teaching, do you realize how powerful that is? We really believe what he's talking about. It's not just, oh, we're smart. It's, oh, we have tools for healing and for dispensing evil as his disciples. For some reason this week, the illustration of a surgeon came to my mind. Now, elsewhere in the Bible, we learn the phrase of Jesus being the great physician. Jesus is the great physician. So Jesus is this healer. And he heals for good, it's not for his own ego. And, if I'm using the illustration of a surgeon could be good or bad. So I'm using the illustration where a surgeon, a really excellent surgeon, knows how to wield the tools of surgery. And I've used this illustration before. One of the tools in that toolkit is a scalpel. And a scalpel can be used for harm, or it can be used for healing. And Jesus, the great physician, has this scalpel of philosophy that heals. Some forms of philosophy, teaching, religion, do not heal. This week, there was a particularly wicked example. There was a court decision that came out, and it's a really dark case of where a dad went to live at his daughter's campus, and it was in New York. Do you hear about this one? I almost hate to talk about it because it's just so dark. So this creepy dad moved into this campus housing situation, and befriended his daughter's circle of friends. And he posed as their mentor. And he was very charismatic. And he was their teacher. He had so many things to teach them. But across time, as they put their trust, these young adults put their trust in him, he turned on them. He undermined their self-worth. He separated them from family and friends. And then he planted ideas that they were harming him so that they were freaking out. And they believed things that were lies. And then he cornered them and made them think that they were in trouble with the law if they spoke up. Classic manipulation. He had studied mind control and cults. He was doing it purposefully. Just a horrible, horrible situation. And it spread to these young adults' families and friends, too. Just terrible, horrible thing. It made me think, what makes us vulnerable to that kind of manipulation? It speaks to the power of philosophy. Whatever your philosophy is, whatever your belief is, whatever teaching that you are teaching or whatever teaching that you are ingesting, it's very powerful, like a scalpel. And the scalpel can harm or the scalpel can heal. Let's be careful about what we teach and what we take in as learners. I hope our church can be part of society's dialogue about it's not anything goes. And it's not about whoever has, the most attractive social media presence or whoever is the most powerful and dynamic in a group social setting. I hope our church is a part of teaching what is good and what is evil, and how do we distinguish between the two, especially in our culture now where everyone likes to poo-poo religion as something from the past. But true religion, the one that we seek to follow and learn from, the religion of Jesus Christ that we see in the Bible, it is new teaching that isn't about the leader getting more power. It's about the leader assessing what is healing, what is not healing, what is evil, what is not evil. And as we study more of the New Testament, we get grounding for what's evil and what's not evil. And we learn about love and about freedom and about looking out for vulnerable people. And maybe it plants a suspicion about, what's going on here? We are given scalpels in faith. We have a scalpel. We have a tool that we have been given to wield. It's a scalpel of faith. And what we believe and how we are taught matters. Later in the story when Jesus teaches, there's others present, religious authority, and they're very threatened by what Jesus has to say. And there's backlash. It's kind of funny, in our own society, there's a lot of politicization around curriculum and things like that. Yeah, curriculum, what is taught? We may think sometimes it's the simple ABCs, it's phase 1, yes, but sometimes it's threatening. And evil won't like it. So what do we do in those cases later down the road? I think we can still stick to what we've been taught. We can still learn, even in the darkness, even in backlash, even in dangerous situations. Even in this story, there's something to learn from that demon. Did you catch that? The onlookers think, Jesus, new teaching. wow, fabulous teacher. But the demon says, I know who you are. You're the Holy One of God. The demon, the evil world, knows who Jesus is. In whatever darkness we go through, whatever challenge, whatever dysfunction, I pray that we don't get sucked in and believe a manipulative person or situation. I hope that we can be taught by the Holy One of God, and that we can continue to learn in every situation, continue to understand. This is what it means to be a disciple. There's basic level learning, and then there's higher level learning. It's all learning from the great physician. And from him, we have a scalpel that whatever we believe also heals. So and you know what? Our church, we're a place for continuing education for surgeons, so that we know how to use the scalpel of faith with humility, with precision, and with incredible healing in whatever conversation or situation we find ourselves in. To God be the glory. Amen.